So, Berto, emails, what do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor, and I'm standing while we are podcasting.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I pick up abandoned popcorn at shows.
So, anonymous listener wrote in, and she says, I wanted to ask about the link between our fetishes and what we like in childhood. I want to ask about the link between our fetishes, sexual fetishes, and what we like in childhood.
I loved He-Man.
Oh, no. I was always excited by cruel, evil characters in media. When I watched children's shows like Disney, the idea of a character getting kidnapped or harmed was exciting to me. Just chiming in, can you think of a Disney movie or show from 20, 30 years ago in which a character was kidnapped or harmed?
Well, okay, so like the Cruella de Vil takes the puppies, right?
Okay.
And so that was one. But then the Ursula kind of doesn't exactly kidnap, but tricks the Little Mermaid and steals her voice.
Right. And she will trick the other mermaids into becoming those little polyps.
Right.
That's like a terrifying.
That's pretty horrible.
I mean, do you remember
Yes.
Little Mermaid? It's like
it's pretty scary.
utterly terrifying, right? Also, Tangled. She's
right. The mama, who's not her real mom,
Right.
imprisons her and tricks her and gaslights the hell out of her.
Right. By the way, Tangled is one of my favorite cartoon animation Disney movies.
Yeah, it's good.
Like, I could rewatch that.
It's got great music.
The story is good. It's super funny.
Yep.
You know, the horse and the guy who saves.
When they go to that bar and all the assassins start singing.
Yeah.
I was very pleasantly surprised with that movie.
Yeah.
And I've watched it since,
Yeah, because they could have just phoned it in and
Yeah.
had a movie that was appealing to 7-year-olds, and it would have been consumed and paid
And it
for.
would have still done well.
But it's a whole other thing to do that and
Right.
make it so that a 54-year-old dude like me will watch it. Going on. As a kid, I would imagine that I was the person put into jail or harmed. I had somewhat of a hard upbringing, by the way. Just chiming in, it kind of sounds like what she's saying is, as a kid, when she would watch Disney, she would fantasize, not sexually, about being the one that was put into jail. But then as an adult, it developed into... But I had somewhat of a hard upbringing, but I, at this point, had not been a victim of sexual abuse. So it's kind of a pertinent.
So hard upbringing in other ways, association with these characters that she likes, but not like a direct sexual thing. No connection yet.
Right.
Okay.
Are thoughts and excitements like these common in children, and why might they arise? So just chiming in, that almost sounds like as a child she was having sort of proto-sexual thoughts. I don't know. Who knows? Why might they continue into adulthood? I was not particularly interested in the romantic scenes in these kids' shows growing up, but instead was interested in the distressing moments. Thank you very much. End of email. Berto, first question, do you think this is common in children? You know, not adults, but children.
Well, the part that certainly I believe is common is that in whatever media, back in the old days would have been just like books or even just oral stories and stuff like that. But certainly now with TVs and movies, I do believe that as kids, we form attachments and associations to what we're watching, and we get very invested in the characters and whatnot. So as far as like, does that translate to the sexual development of the child? I would imagine to some extent, because if they're at an age where they're developing sexually and they have something that they're really into, maybe that does, and it's got like stereotypes and archetypes that they're seeing, maybe. But
Yeah, I have not read any. I briefly tried to find some research regarding this question, and I couldn't find any. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't any research specifically in looking into this phenomenon. Anecdotally, I haven't heard of anyone with this specific experience, but the general experience, which I'll get into in a second, is very common, actually. So it could just be a subset of a larger phenomenon that is well understood and well researched. By the way, Berto, we were marveling when you first came in that it feels like it's been a long time since we've hung out, because it has been, I think, a few weeks, but also 3 weeks ago we saw each other, and then prior to that we were recording the deep dive on Diddy, and we were also doing the Elon Musk stuff. So we saw each other in maybe like a 6 week period, like
a lot,
15 times, doing very concentrated, fun events for your birthday.
That's true.
We did the sing along thing with, there's a small theater in Seattle where they will show videos from the 80s, and we were singing along. And then
that was a lot of fun.
We went out for a very fancy birthday dinner,
bougie dinner,
at Herb Farm. That your wife paid for, by the way, which I tried to pay my portion, but your wife was like, no. So it just feels like, and I will tell you that it feels good to have you here. Sometimes I get that feeling of like, I'm home or something. I'm excited to record podcasts with you.
Well, we were going to record a couple weeks ago, and then there was this snow.
Right.
And we got snowed out in my area. Did you guys get much snow out here?
Barely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like schools were canceled for like 3 days. It's crazy.
The thing about Seattle is we might go an entire winter without any snow.
Yeah.
So there isn't the infrastructure and the familiarity. So people don't have snow tires. There's no snow plows.
No.
I mean, famously in all of Seattle, I'm guessing it's different now, but there was a time not that long ago, 5-10 years ago, up until that point, where the entirety of Seattle had 2 snow plows for the entire city. And apparently each municipality has its own. And actually, when I lived temporarily for a bit in Shoreline, which is just outside of Seattle, they had a much smaller footprint to plow, and they had like 10 plows.
Oh, wow.
And I noticed this huge difference that when it would snow, the road, because that's the thing, if you plow it,
then it's fine.
It's fine, yeah. But when you don't, especially under some circumstances where it's prolonged cold weather, it not only can get icy, obviously, but we've had it where the ice will form on top of itself and create these like weird ice ditches in the middle of the road where you're sort of off-roading,
when a lot of us have front wheel all-weather tires, like,
well, speaking of, is this the first time you've driven your Porsche over to this house?
Yes, I do believe so.
Why did you drive it?
Well, first of all, because the tabs in my Honda are expired.
Oh, really?
Actually, I've already paid for them.
Yeah.
But I need to go pick them up.
Okay.
And
you can have them mailed to you, by the way.
Well, that was originally the plan. We sent the check, but they never did it. So I went online and did it, and they're like, you could pick it up at the thing. But anyways, so I didn't want to risk it. And
I don't think Seattle cops pull people over for tabs. I think if they pull you over and you have, then they give you a ticket. Right. Anyway.
But also,
but you should drive it more often over here.
I used to be scared to drive it to Seattle because I didn't want to park it somewhere or whatever. But driving here is fine.
Yeah, I have a pretty big.
And I actually drove it on Bro Day when my brother took me out for my birthday and stuff.
All right.
And we parked it all over Seattle. It was fine. So.
Yeah. And if it gets a ding, it's not like it's impossible to fix. It's not like a vintage Aston Martin or something.
No.
Okay. The other question that you ask, anonymous listener, is why would this arise? Why would someone as a child both find it exciting to fantasize about being kidnapped while watching these Disney movies, and why would an adult later on be turned on by that fantasy, Berto?
That's an interesting one. So first of all, I don't actually remember, and even in spite of having had experienced abuse when I was younger, I don't remember watching, because I watched a lot of cartoons and a lot of shows, and I don't have explicit memories of watching those and having sexual connections with them. I might have, I just don't remember. I don't have those memories. But what I guess,
for our generation, it would be like when Bugs Bunny would dress up as a as a lady.
Yeah,
and would be trying to seduce Elmer Fudd.
Right. But I was thinking, okay, so like He-Man is a,
oh boy, yeah. There's
like
a lot of
big buff dude wearing almost nothing, and then there's like.
I mean, can you see his nips?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know, maybe.
Well, and then his lady companion.
That's right, Tila. Oh my goodness.
Okay. I always get He-Man mixed up with the other one.
Thundercats?
No, that's a good guess, but
the Herculoids?
No, it's another one with a guy, a powerful guy,
Superman,
who has he's very similar to He-Man.
Okay.
Maybe I'm mixing up. Or Thundar the Barbarian.
Yeah, Thundar. Right.
Yeah.
That's what I
Did you watch that?
Yeah. I did, but I don't think they showed it in Colombia. They only showed it. I watched it when I was living in New York.
Yeah. Thundar. I think until maybe a few weeks ago, I always just had thought Thundar and He-Man were the same thing because they look very similar.
No, well, Thundar was fine.
Thundar is a riff on Conan.
Yeah.
And He-Man is a riff
on a riff of a riff. Basically, He-Man was like, okay, we need toys. We need a toy line.
Yeah.
And so we need to produce it kind of cheaply. So we'll have one model which got like the buffness, right?
Right.
And then we'll apply different paint to it, little different attachments.
I remember realizing that when I was a kid, that Man-at-Arms, his buddy, had the exact same body but just a different color uniform.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they started veering a little bit from that, but mostly that was it.
And I guess He-Man is like sci-fi fantasy.
Yes, because they do have tech. They have tech. That's right.
Yeah.
But anyways, He-Man was fun, but it was definitely an engineered show for sure.
So you don't remember being turned on by He-Man's nips?
So I don't remember. That said, what I will say is that so not cartoons, but the live action shows. I remember having some heavy crushes on some of the.
Who?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Linda Carter.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah.
And
what isn't the history highly suggestive or confirmed that the original author of Wonder Woman, the comic, was in his personal life really into BDSM?
Oh, I did not know that, but that would make a lot of sense. There's a little lasso that compels you to tell the truth, and then you got little bonding, the handcuffs or whatever.
Wow, you're really making all the connections. Yeah, I think the guy actually, so it makes sense on some level.
In a very tight costume.
Yeah, boy.
And then I also love Jacqueline Smith in the
oh my God, Charlie's Angels.
Charlie's Angels, yeah.
Last week, Berto, I watched the pilot episode of Charlie's Angels.
Oh, yeah?
It's free on YouTube right now.
Oh, I gotta watch it.
And the pilot episode is better than the regular episodes.
Okay.
They had a better budget, and the music. I figured while I was watching that the music is actually scored specifically for the episode, meaning that
the action matches the music. Yeah,
and it's this funky. It's a really good band, with a really good writing.
That feels like a rug pull, right? Like you get the show approved.
I know.
And they're like, all right, now do it at half the cost.
The other thing is you remember Bosley. So for people that are older or younger than us, they're just like, what's Charlie's Angels?
Yeah.
But you remember Bosley.
Yep.
Well, the pilot had another guy too.
Oh.
And that actor was the replacement for
the Bosley voice?
For the guy who left, or he was a later addition to MASH.
Okay.
He was like the stuffy, like Harvard man. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember him?
Yeah.
Kind of tall and bald and stuff.
Right.
He played this like other Bosley.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
They were like, okay, that's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Stream it down.
Yeah.
Cut the budget in half.
Yeah.
Don't pay this many actors.
That guy must have been real pissed, but he ended up on MASH, so he was okay.
And it's great because you never actually see Bosley, right?
No, you don't see Charlie.
Bosley, right.
Bosley is
Charlie is the voice on the speaker, so you never see Charlie.
Right.
And so they don't have to pay him as much, probably.
Right. Yeah. But yeah. So which one was Jacqueline?
Oh, she was one of the three, but I mean, I don't remember her character.
Well, so there's Farrah Fawcett.
The other gal who
Right. So I think the one. So there are two brunettes, and I think the brunette you're talking about was, I think, considered to be the more hot one.
Well, and she was also in the original Bourne Identity like miniseries.
I didn't even know there was one of those.
Yeah, with the same guy who played Shogun and Thornbird's.
Oh yeah,
What's his name? With kind of redheaded, goatee.
Richard Chamberlain.
Richard Chamberlain.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I had a huge crush on. So my little buds were budding.
Okay.
But
how old were you? Do you think?
So what year was that? Like a 10? I was 10, 11.
When it was on the air?
Yeah.
No, you would have been like 3 or 4.
Yeah, but when I was seeing it in Colombia, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I, as a kid, barely remember Charlie's Angels.
They were, in Colombia, they showed a lot of U.S. shows, sometimes years after they came out.
Right. We talked about this, how Riptide.
Yes.
You and I loved Riptide.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let me... Oh, you remember this song?
Yeah.
Dear listeners and anonymous listener, let me tell you what I took notes on. So there's a lot that I could get into regarding sexuality and development and fantasy and stigma and how these kinds of experiences and turn-ons, if you will, are a lot more varied and strange and hard to pin down in terms of cause. But in brief, what I'll say, number one, is that many people have sexual fantasies and turns on that are related to what you're talking about. So although I've never heard anecdotally about your specific turn on, I consider it to be a part of a larger group of turn-ons about being overpowered. And there's a lot of different types, and there's a lot of different subcultures and names. Just to name a few of the common ones that people might... Well, what are some common ones that you can think of?
Of being overpowered?
Yeah.
Well,
like BDSM.
Yeah.
That's a label that you can Google on Pornhub or something. But what are some other labels that you can think of?
Let's see. Kink. I don't know.
Yeah.
Foot fetish.
Yeah. I mean, those aren't necessarily... I mean, yeah, maybe foot fetish is a bit of has a dom element. But anyway, there's bondage.
Oh, so BDSM and bondage are not...
BDSM, you could consider it to be more specific and or... There's a Venn diagram, right? Anyway, so bondage, daddy dom little girl stuff. Have you heard of that? Also dominatrix.
Daddy dom little
rape fantasies. We've talked about rape fantasies.
Yes.
A lot of people have fantasies about being raped or raping. And when they do research on these folks, 99% of them say, I do not want to be raped, and I do not want to rape. I just get turned on by the idea of a half consensual experience. All the bodice ripper books.
Yeah, of course. The what's his name? Fernando Gerardo. What's his name? Fabio.
Yeah.
So
Stacy actually will say that because she did that modeling work on those bodice ripper books, and in one of them, her claim to fame is she was wearing Fabio's fuzzy vest in one of those books. Yeah.
I always wonder about this. Like, clothes were not easy to come by back then, right? In the medieval times. Uh-huh. So you're like in the heat of passion and you tear someone's bodice. It's like, dude, where am I going to get another bodice? Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
It's not like today you can just go to Target, buy a new T-shirt, It's like,
but that's the whole point, right? It's like he wants you that badly.
But is he going to pay for the new bodice?
Well, speaking of, financial dom.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you remember that movie Tokyo Decadence?
No.
It was a movie set in Tokyo where these very powerful...
It'd be weird if it was set in like Columbus, Ohio or something.
So my brother's pet peeve about my speech impediments is that I usually say 11 a.m. in the morning or things like that. And he's like, oh, is it in the morning? Anyway, so Tokyo Decadence, these very powerful businessmen, they need to be dominated. And it seems to be like part of it is that in their daily life, they're controlling all this financial crazy empires. But I don't know, is that the same or is that more standard domination?
It sounds like FinDom, I think is what it's called. And it's a subset of BDSM. And that's one of the hypotheses. But I have found, and looking at the research and also anecdotally, that a lot of people would say that the people who are into dom are typically men who have a lot of power, and then during the during their sex times, they want that role reversed. And certainly that can be a possibility. But I think that conclusion is based on circumstance, like the individuals that can afford to pay for a sex worker, they're going to be rich. And in the past, that would only be dudes. And people that were allowed to express their sexuality, even to some extent, would be guys as well. So
it's a self-selecting
right, because we're hearing from her, a woman, saying that she's turned on by being dominated. Do we think that she's the CEO? I mean, maybe she is, but she doesn't mention that. Anyway, another one is called brats and tamers, meaning that people like to act like a bratty teen or a bratty kid. And there's a lot of different subsets. And this is one of them, wanting to be, I mean, I wonder if anonymous listener literally would want to role play as Rapunzel. People do that.
Right. Or what if someone watched Return of the Jedi and wanted to be Princess Leia being captive?
Actually, I guarantee you
that exists.
From either direction. I'm going to be Jabba. Hobo.
So you know what I just realized? I had a minor version of this. Did you ever watch V, The Final Battle?
No. I mean, it was on TV at a time when I just did not have time to regularly watch, but it was right up my alley.
So, spoiler alert, but they were these alien invaders, and the main female alien was this very attractive brunette who happens to be an evil alien in disguise. But I definitely had a crush on her, and I actually...
Was it Diana?
Yeah, Diana. When I played V, The Final Battle, which was all the time, because what I would do is I would have my Star Wars...
You would pretend.
Yeah, I would have my Star Wars Stormtrooper play gun that I had when I was a kid, that had the little toot, right? Yeah. I would use that as my gun and pretend that I was fighting against V, The Final Battle.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at pictures. They had a really cool gun.
Yeah.
Which was... half of the reason why sci-fi was watched by me back then was the style of the gun.
Yeah, and so I would pretend that I was doing that, and then part of it was getting captured by Diana. So there was a little bit of an element there.
Well, I don't know if you want to get into it, but you've talked about other Dom elements, not strong Dom fantasies.
Not strong Dom.
But
but it's certainly when I was...
Well, I don't know if you've talked about it on the podcast before, but...
I'll just mention a couple things. But when I was... young teenager, me and this other girl, we would role play where...
let's pause you because we need to go to a commercial break.
Let's do it.
And this will entice people to listen to the commercials. All right, we're back from the break. So let's move on, Berto. Just tell us your story.
Well, so me and this girl, we would role play. This is around age of 12 or so. So just at the dawning of the age of Aquarius. We would role play where they were definitely a high-powered woman in some business tycoon kind of situation. And I was in the same industry, but definitely nowhere near as powerful. And they would therefore get to call all the shots.
Sexually harass you.
Basically, I guess. Yeah. I didn't really think about it that way. But, and the way this started too.
Did you roll? Was there an HR? Did you have a friend?
No, we didn't go that far. But we would sometimes play Monopoly and then actually pause the game to role play like this.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you?
It started around 12, I think. And it was for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Was it sexual?
It only went as far as clothes grinding, no full nudity.
So yes.
Well, yes, definitely sexual in nature, just not we didn't have sex, but
Well, you had sexual activity.
Yes.
Because I was asking if it wasn't explicitly sexual.
It was explicitly yes, because in the role playing we were having sex. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, okay,
yeah,
all right. So
because she would always seduce me. And I was always like, oh, what's going on here? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then,
wow, that's advanced
the
shit.
Alien Diana would capture me and impregnate me with alien babies.
Would you just be like, so I know I can't pay rent because I landed on Park Place, but I've got other things I can give you.
Oh, my God.
Okay, so... to get back to your email, yeah, many people have sexual fantasies and turn-ons related to being overpowered. And many people can identify experiences in their early childhood that relate, that are precursors, little experiences or even sexual charges. We tend to think about sexuality as occurring post-pubescence, but for many people, they can have what they would later frame as a sexual, proto-sexual experience, a feeling or a tingling feeling. I think I was reading on Reddit or something. I can't remember what the thread was about, but this woman was saying that as a child, as a tween, she said that she told her mom, she was confused. She was watching something and she said she was confused. And she told her mom that she had a tingling feeling in her stomach when she watched a particular TV show. I can't remember what it was. Oh, maybe it was Knight Rider or something, or Baywatch. Or maybe it was what's his face?
Michael.
Michael.
Michael was in the show.
Hutch.
David
Hasselhoff. She said that was when her mom strangely forbade her from watching that TV show.
But that's because the mom was also getting tingly feelings in her tummy.
Yeah. But just imagine, Mommy, when I watch David Hasselhoff, I get a tingly feeling in my lower stomach. What's going on there? It's just like, okay, TV thrown out the window. So the question is it related to your rough childhood? It's impossible to know. It could be, but it might not be. That's the tempting conclusion, I think, based on sex negativity, I suppose, or meaning that people think of kinks like this as anomalous and strange and maybe even pathological, which they're not. They're not pathological. They're not strange. It's the kinks are more the norm, and which goes against the definition of kink because it's supposed to be something that's rare. But it is often like, well, there must be something wrong. You must have had some abuse. And maybe, and we just don't know. But I'll hear stories from people that have kinks like this and maybe even more severe, if you will. And they had wonderful childhoods. There's just a lot of different expressions of sexuality. So in terms of why this would happen, why, Berto, would a lot of people have fantasies about being overpowered?
I think one thought is that when you are having sexual activity, sexual intercourse, there is, especially if you're, for example, having an orgasm, there is a lack of control. Like your body in a way loses control. Also, I think as we're growing up, the whole thing is mysterious and, it feels like you're navigating without a map. So again, out of control. So maybe there is something to like, I don't know, just take me. I don't even want to know. Just, maybe that's associated directly with that progression of like, you're stepping into the unknown, your body's going to lose control, but you need someone to guide you. So maybe.
And in a similar vein, for some people, particularly women who have been socialized to not be slutty, right? They will sometimes fantasize about being overpowered because it releases them from the stigma and accusation that they're a slut, right?
Oh, that's a great point. Like this, and maybe it's more than even just women in the sense that, especially in some cultures, religious and whatnot, where there's stigma in general with sex, like, oh, that's dirty. It's like, you're not supposed to do it, blah, blah. So maybe that's part of it too, is like you're saying.
Right.
They get to have their cake. It's not my fault.
They get to have their cake and eat it too. Yeah. They get sexual gratification while remaining pure, if you will.
Actually, I will say that in my case, there was definitely elements of that due to, well, I think at least in part or largely due to the abuse I experienced, because that was a case where like it wasn't my fault, right? But then later in life and as an adult, there is an aspect where a lot of my fantasies sometimes involve a situation where I'm not in control, like going to the doctor, for example, and or things like that where it's maybe it's a safer version of that, but it's still me not having full control.
Right. It's totally safe.
Yeah.
You're not being abused.
Yeah.
You are in control. You're role playing or fantasizing
Right.
in your head. And for many people who have been through sexual abuse, and a lot of people have been through, to varying degrees, sexual coercion, exploitation, harm. And it is a way to have some psychological satisfaction around control and reworking a scenario in our minds. Also, we might be identifying with the abuser. You know, just because, anonymous listener, you weren't sexually abused, we tend to silo these experiences, right? There's sex stuff and then there's non-sex stuff. But there's just human stuff. So you can be overpowered or overlooked or feel powerless, completely unrelated to sexuality as a young person chronically, and yet also have that need to recreate it in various different arenas, including sexuality. That does not mean that it's a bad thing. Just because you are having sexual experiences that are, in a sense, recreating abusive experiences that you went through, that doesn't necessarily mean that those sexual experiences are harming you or quote unquote bad.
Yeah.
It could be, you know, for some people that are sexually harmed, they will unfortunately unconsciously recreate the harm that happened to them, and they will be experiencing trauma as a result. But anyway,
I think like, for again, using myself as an example, it's the difference for me between when I was in my late 20s, doing sort of unsafe things with unsafe sexual things that I didn't realize were sort of putting me in a situation of danger and recreating forms of the abuse, as opposed to me fantasizing that I'm going to the doctor's office, maybe doing that with my partner or something, like very different.
Right. One was harming you, continuing to harm, and another was not, was just another way to enjoy sex. So you might like this hypothesis, and of course we have no idea. I'm joking about you might, but it has to do with evolutionary psychology. And we might have evolved to seek a powerful partner because the powerful people within our social group, our tribe back in the day, might be more likely to be fit regarding their genes for survival and procreation. So there's that possibility. It could be part of the, it could be one of the many factors. Also, there's the powerlessness of being an infant. So one of the ways of looking at sensuality and sexuality is that when, again, we tend to silo these things, but it is quite possible that every attachment-oriented touch sensual experience that we have informs our development sexually. Meaning that when we're breastfeeding, when we are cuddling with our parents at the age of 9 months old or something, these aren't explicitly, they're not at all sexual. And the child and the parent are not engaging in any kind of sexual touch. But it's touch, and it feels good, and it's closeness, and it's warmth. And as we develop into sexuality, we might adopt some of these things. It is hypothesized and has been hypothesized that the fact that we even just kiss at all, let alone passionately French kiss with tongue, is related to breastfeeding.
Sure.
Why would we lock our faces together and like lick each other's tongues? It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical.
It is funny because that doesn't actually lead to the procreation part.
No.
I mean, indirectly it does, but not directly.
But it could very well be argued that it returns us to almost the womb and a feeling of being safe and together and melding with another person.
Right.
Another possibility is that we sometimes, one way of putting it, get our wires crossed. Like some people will be spanked and experience it as a negative experience, obviously, as a child. We tend to think of the functions of the body as being very discrete and logical, but our body is a mess of goo and neurons, when you are being spanked, it's in the region of your genitals.
And it's still attention being paid to you.
Yeah, but even just the stimulation of the neurons that are close to one's genitals, and, unintentionally, one could have both the feeling of pain and of being punished and not feeling good about what's happening. And there can be neurons in the genital regions that are stimulated.
Like hot sauce.
I suppose. What do you mean?
Well, like hot sauce, when you apply hot sauce to your genitals. No, I mean, hot sauce is painful, but it's also pleasurable.
Okay.
And so in a similar way, you could have that pain, but it's also kind of maybe subconsciously giving you some pleasure.
Right. So, and there's all this theory around endorphins and around just emotional experiences. We humans tend to look for a balance between stimulation of any kind and relaxation. So when you talk about horror movies or jumping out of a plane, or we might also have those experiences in bed. So that's one, and there's a lot we get into. The second thing that I took notes on was that you, anonymous listener, might have, as a child, wanted to be kidnapped for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe to escape your family, right? Even though you're being kidnapped by a villain, maybe that was preferred to what you went through. Also, maybe in the cartoons, you were seeing something that was concrete. It was understood. Everyone who was involved and onlookers would define the person that's being abducted as being abducted. Whereas when you are in a family that has the look of a functional family, or at the very least, no one conceptualizes you as a child as a prisoner or something, it can feel very invalidating and gaslighting, right?
Right.
And you might have wanted a concrete, clear, discrete behavioral experience so that you could be identified as the way that you felt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see that. So basically, even though that's not by normal lenses a good outcome,
right?
In your mind, it's like, hey, it's a definite outcome.
Right. And people will do that sometimes. Yeah. Number 3, maybe you wanted a hero to save you, because in the Disney movies, when
when you get abducted, it's actually good.
Well, yeah, because the abductee rarely
prince.
Remains the abductee by the end of a Disney movie, right?
Well, it's usually the prince is saving the prince. Like, in the Sleeping Beauty, it's technically a dude breaking into the tower, but it's good.
So the abduction could be like foreplay in a sense. It's like it comes with the package, right? You can't be rescued by the prince if you aren't abducted first.
Not abducted.
And the fourth thing is what we call repetition compulsion, what Freud called repetition compulsion, which is essentially wanting a do-over to some extent.
Wait, hold on. Tell me that again.
So you can perhaps get it right this time. We've already kind of talked about that. But a subset of this is masochism,
right? In
that one will feel like they deserve whatever they went through, and therefore unconsciously they will just have it happen to them. Or, as we were talking about with you, the individual wants control this time. So it's this assumption like, well, I'm going to be abused. I might as well get out ahead of it and get some semblance of control, some sense of control by dictating when and how and why and who and that kind of stuff. Right. But I'm still going to be abused because that'll happen regardless. And it'd be better just to get it out of the way. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So maybe it had to do with that, as to why you, anonymous listener, were interested in those Disney abductions, and somehow it got related to sexuality for you. But anyway, but from your email, the long and the short of it is, it kind of sounds like from your email you're thinking, is there something wrong with me? You're not asking that directly, but the answer is no. Do I need to change it? You're not asking that, but I'll answer that question. No. If it's causing a problem, it would be helpful to look at how to modify things and how to situate it so it's not harming you. maybe you have to get rid of it entirely or refrain, if you will, from it and find other replacement turn-ons or whatever. But, people have all sorts of experiences. And the fact that you have precursor experiences as a child is also common. We tend to see that as some sort of abnormality or pathology or even something that's disgusting. But plenty of children, I mean, anyone who has had babies and infants know that sometimes their hands, while you're changing diapers, they just go down there and they're just like, what's going on down there? And they like the way it feels. Is that a sexual experience that they're having? I mean, I don't know how we want to define those things, but it could be framed that way by the individual doing it, right?
Right.
They might grow up and say like, yeah, I remember like I would have my hands down my pants and it's normal. Kids are innocent and sometimes they discover things. Now, sometimes it's an expression of that they've been harmed and introduced to things, but not always. Plenty of kids without having ever been abused or exposed to anything just find it fun or stimulating or interesting or an exploration, or it soothes them, or so, and there's something wrong with us as a society that we freak the fuck out when that stuff like that happens.
It's funny, like something like that happened to me in the inverse where regularly I would watch TV. The television was in my grandparents' room, and you know this about me, you know how I love scratchies, right? Like, okay, so often I would just lay on my grandma's lap and she would give me back scratchies. And it's the best thing in the world. And there was nothing sexual about it. It's literally just like someone giving me loving scratchies, right? So I remember one time I was probably 9, maybe 10, and I was getting my scratchies, watching whatever program. And it was so fun that I was just kind of like squirming. But my dad, like all of a sudden gets angry. He's like, Berto, come here. And I'm like, what? And I come out and he's like, don't do that in your grandma's bed or whatever. I'm like, what? He's like, you were, and he couldn't even talk about it properly. He's like, you were grinding or something. I'm like, and I was so confused. I didn't actually understand what he was talking about till years later. But at the time I was like, because I was getting scratches and stuff.
Yeah. And it's really unfortunate. I mean, I get it. I could imagine what your dad saw.
Yeah,
because at the same time, you were having a completely innocent, non-genital experience.
Oh my
And because
gosh.
we're so sex negative,
I know
that it's like absolutely disgusting and criminal even.
And it's rough because at those ages, by 10, you start looking larger. I have a 9-year-old now. And they start growing, right? So they're not as teeny as before. Because if you see a little teeny baby, like wriggling around in a bed, no thoughts can. But all of a sudden, as they start getting bigger and they start looking a little more teenagery, then that might be where the adult freaks out. But it's to your point, like why? And it's especially unfortunate because luckily in my case, like that instance, even though I remember it, I don't feel like it scarred me, but it was so unnecessary.
Yeah.
I was having such a good time watching TV with Granny.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a break. When we get back, another email. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
All right. Back from the break. Anonymous patron, she writes in and says, is this normal? I was sexually abused by multiple family members. By the way, trigger warning. Trigger warning. I don't think this email gets graphic at all, but... anonymous patron, I was sexually abused by multiple family members during different points in my childhood. I'm currently back in therapy and have made a lot of progress in recovering. I generally feel very comfortable and open with my therapist, but I'm not ready to ask him about the following topic. I have 2 sons, ages... Actually, it's so interesting. This email has everything to do with what you just brought up.
Oh, wow.
I have 2 sons, ages 3 and 5. And I love them so much, it's almost painful, LOL. But I have a really hard time showing them love physically. Like, I have to be really intentional about hugging and kissing them. Chiming in here, I think what she means is she has to almost kind of force herself in a sense. And a lot of the times when I'm making normal parent-child physical connection, such as snuggling up while we watch a movie, it feels good, but it also feels wrong to me. And I almost feel weird or icky about it. So a reminder, 3 and 5-year-old boys. The logical part of me knows that I love my children in appropriate ways and wouldn't hurt them in any way that I've been hurt. But there's a pesky lingering feeling that doubts whether what I'm doing or feeling is appropriate, or worries that I'm making them uncomfortable and just generally stressing over what's appropriate. I do often find myself thinking about how victims of sexual abuse often become abusers themselves, so maybe I'm just scared that I can't trust myself even though I know I'm not that way. I don't know. I'm bad at analyzing my thoughts and feelings, so I'm hoping that you can provide some reassurance and insight. Thanks so much for all you do. Berto, what do you think?
Wow, that's so hard. I can think of a couple ways in which I've thought about these things. So when I have 2 girls and they are having sleepovers, with friends and things like that, and I can tell that I'm way more paranoid about things like that than a lot of the other parents.
Cuddling with your kids?
No, not cuddling. Not even that. I'm just talking about like, they're going to go have a sleepover at a friend's house, or the friend is going to have.
That your kids are going to get harmed.
And I worry both directions. I worry that I'm going to get accused of something if one of their friends has a sleepover at my place. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, I try to keep these things rationally in check, but it's still in my mind. And I've noticed, at least outwardly, that I seem to be a lot more paranoid about these things than some of the other parents that I interact with.
Even other dads?
Yeah, even other dads. Now, I don't know their backstory, but I wouldn't be surprised if, given my history, that would contribute to me being paranoid about it.
Yeah.
Okay. In my case, luckily, I guess, I've never had...
Does being a brown person have anything to do with it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Okay, so in my case, I've never actually explicitly felt anything like what they're describing about my kids, but I have definitely had that fear about like, what if, because, I was 5, my babysitter was 12, so it wasn't an adult, but still there was that age difference. So I've definitely been concerned at times of like, what if I end up like having feelings towards like a younger person or something like that? Or what if I get accused? Like that's been some paranoia. Again, never to the point where like interferes in my life, but those thoughts definitely cross my mind. In this case, I think the added damage is that, because, in my case, luckily it wasn't adult and it wasn't directly family, right. But those factors, I can only understand how that would, and I think the listener is doing the right things by thinking and sending this letter and really being explicit about it, confronting their fears and whatnot. Obviously, it should go without saying that the instinct that they have to like absolutely, not do anything inappropriate, of course. But it sounds like they are more worried about the way they feel about even normal cuddling, rather than fearing like they're going to do something more.
Right.
And that's sad, because I can imagine that draws a barrier. I had my mom and my brother and I have talked about this. My mom has some, barriers when it comes to physical affection. And so when we were kids, we both know that, or we both remember that like sitting and cuddling with mom was not a thing.
You and your brother.
Yeah, like that was just not a thing. And I'm not saying it's the same situation for her, but I know that in her mind, that was something that either caused her discomfort or she didn't want to do it for whatever reason.
You don't know why.
I mean, I know that like, things like she was sent to a school, like she had a lot of separation, a lot of, attachment issues and things like that. But in either case, we experienced it from the other side.
Was she sent to a boarding school? Is that what you're saying?
Something like that, yeah.
Like because she
like
was
a nun place or something like that.
Was she richer or something? Was she one of those?
No, there were other factors, but that for us, for my brother and I, we experienced it from the other side. Meaning, growing up, we now talk about it like, yeah, she clearly had an issue with that. So that's one risk, is that your children could grow up feeling like, mom never liked to be too affectionate or something like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well put. I don't know if I'll add very much other than to say that, it's very normal and understandable and unfortunate. And given the circumstances, this might be the best scenario, in that you're working on it and you're doing your best. And if out of the extreme trauma and difficulty that you grew up with, if none of those things are happening to your kids and you are having an asterisk on those experiences that make you feel a little, maybe very uncomfortable, but it's not overly so hindering your physical warmth with your kids, then I would say you're way above the curve. So I think that it's expected that there would be some symptom or some experience or some hang up, if you will. And it looks like you absolutely, anonymous patron, understand it. You're not shaming yourself. You're not avoiding touching your kids. You just have these questions that are normal. The question is completely understandable, especially if you're chronically sexually abused by, you say, multiple family members.
Jeez, yeah.
And it's quite possible that those family members also had consensual, appropriate touch with you at times. It'd be bizarre if they didn't.
Right.
So how do you, as a victim of that, and also just a family member that had consensual, non-harmful physical touch, how do you differentiate between the two? Looking back, and especially as a kid, how would you would not, it'd be impossible. And as an adult, where is that line? And also, can you trust yourself given those experiences? It all makes sense. There's no reason, and it sounds like you're not really in this camp where you truly do not trust yourself. I would definitely talk with your therapist about this. You're saying that you're not ready to ask him about it. I think it's a perfect topic for therapy, obviously, because it has to be specifically, it has to be on a case-by-case basis. Because, right now your email and our response is very general, but if you were to talk with your therapist about it, you could talk about a thing that happened last night. Okay, so this is happening and I felt this way. And you could probably, in your heart the answers, but to have a good relationship with your therapist who can, in the next to the moment, the next day, say, yeah, I mean, that's not abusive. I mean, and also having criteria to help you understand the difference between harmful touch and non-harmful touch.
Yeah.
And how to detect, because think about for yourself, Berto, as a dad, there are, times when there's physical intimacy or even just like putting hands on in a non-harmful way, just like directing them through a doorway or something, or putting on their shoes, or, there's touch, there's physical contact.
Constantly.
Yeah. And how do you have the inner sense that is mostly running unconsciously or out of your awareness that tells you the line between, okay touch and possibly bad touch, and not only sexually, but being too stern or too angry or too forceful or too physically painful or something.
Yeah, because you can think like even just like let's say you're in a hurry and you grab their arm to like pull them to go faster, like that can still be harmful in some ways.
Right. And if you're really concerned about that because of what you went through, and you also don't trust yourself because of the models that you had, every physical interaction, you would just be like, oh my God. And you also are desperate not to harm your kids the way that you were harmed. So yeah, it requires, it sounds like Anonymous Patron, you've already done a lot of work, which is great, but I would definitely occasionally talk with your therapist about this and go over specific instances. You can also talk with just people in your life. You can talk with other parents that or maybe not a family member, but other people that went through not the experiences that you went through. People, like for myself, I didn't go through experiences like that, so I'm one of those people that has no paranoia about any of that stuff. Right. When I did in-home therapy for 15 years, it was 99% of the time it was teenagers and their parents, and 50% of the time it was a teenage girl.
Right.
And I would say of those teenage girls, it doesn't really matter what the gender of the kid is, but maybe teenage girls are more of a flashpoint for an accusation or an indication for me to be sensitive. But whenever I talked with the teenagers by themselves, I would talk in their bedroom. If we couldn't talk in the living room, it wasn't like that was my preference. It was usually because I would usually be able to talk with the kids in the after school or in the evening, right? Because it's after school, it's during the week. And when I would arrive at the house, the whole family would be there. Sometimes, 3, 4, 10 people. And I can't commandeer the living room so that no one. And sometimes my sessions would be 3 hours long or something. So it just made sense that I would meet with the kids either in a rec room or like a garage or in my car or in their bedroom. And most kids, I've learned, and it makes sense, do not have chairs in their own bedroom.
Yeah, why would you have a chair in your
bedroom? And sometimes I could bring one in, but not everyone has like an easy chair that I could unfold in a kid's bedroom. So I would sit on the floor or sometimes on their bed, and they would sit on the floor. You just sort of figure it out. And at no point ever did I feel like I was in danger or that even I would be accused of something. Yeah. And I never was accused of anything.
Yeah, so that's an example of where, like, in my mind, and again, I having done a ton of work now and like just also going through the process of raising kids, I'm very much different. I would say that actually it's sort of gone in a bell curve. When I started in my early 20s, I was completely unaware of any of it, right? So I wouldn't have thought to be paranoid or anything because I just was unaware. But certainly by the time I became aware, like that, I was abused, all these things, I think that's probably where the height of my paranoia about everything would have been. But even now, knowing what I know, and I would still, my little spidey senses would be on alert, like, no, I need to, make sure there's another adult so that I cannot be accused or whatever, right? Like so in my case, it would be less about me struggling with feelings that like you might have when you interview pedophiles and things like that. In my case, I don't know why, luckily, that just didn't end up being an issue. Maybe it's because we were both kids. I don't know.
Meaning you were never attracted to kids.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm paranoid, or my fear has always been more about like, I want to make sure, are there cameras here? Are people watching me, please? Like, like evidence, witnesses.
Yeah. I mean, it's never a bad idea to play it safe, but.
No, but in my case, I feel like it was more than you would have.
It was excessive, and it would create undue suffering for you.
Yeah,
and might limit behavior that would otherwise be beneficial for everybody.
Right. And I talked to my therapist a little bit back in the day about this, and I feel like the main reason was probably an overcompensation. Like I was trying to safeguard myself so that, because this is the way I analyzed it, is that if I was always paranoid to make sure that I was never in a situation that would be compromising, then I wouldn't even have to be in, I wouldn't have to be in a compromising situation. Do you know what I mean?
Like you didn't want to find out if you had an inclination.
Exactly. But this is my guess, my theory was that I was probably overcompensating. Like, okay, just like train cameras on me the whole time.
Right.
but like over time, I was like, okay, I don't think this is a problem for me, right? Yeah. And then also, I started realizing as I had my first child and then they started growing, I'm like, oh man, there's so many things. Like raising kids is a lot about a lot of things. If all you're thinking about constantly is when they're going to get abused, like you're going to miss their childhood. So, yes.
Especially if you're alone with them, you know what I mean?
Right.
If you're worried about them being abused by you, even though you have no inclination to do that.
And like, I don't know if we can take them to daycare, like like these kind of things. And over time it was like, okay, I need to like start realizing that yes, it's good to be, have your spidey senses, things like that. Obviously not do stupid things. The neighbor weird guy who just got out of jail says they can watch the girls all weekend long at their cabin. Okay, no, but it doesn't mean that, okay, we can't even put them in daycare for an hour, like, because, Right. So anyways, stuff like that. In this case, I'll also add that and it's just a question. I don't know. You tell me what you think. Would it help for them to watch other parents with their young kids?
Oh yeah, it could. Yeah.
To see what's quote unquote done out there, like,
Yeah, absolutely.
in the light of day.
Yeah, I mean, she might not have much or enough modeling along those lines. I mean, why do I and why did I have an understanding of all of that as a young person myself, taking care of my younger brother, or roughhousing with my younger brother and his friends, or as a therapist in my 20s and I'm going into people's rooms? How do I know those lines? Well, I learned through observation. No one showed me a PowerPoint on that when I was growing up.
Right.
I saw it, and my family had a lot of touch. My mom and dad and my siblings, we were wrestling and tickling and hugging and kissing and cuddling and riding on each other's backs to the bus stop and occasionally getting a little angry and pushy, and so there's like all those experiences tell you where those lines are.
And now that you mentioned that actually really helped me growing up to counteract that abuse I had, because the rest of my experiences with my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, everything was always so positive. And so like around, like, my uncles would like roll me up in a blanket and toss me around, or we'd play tickle fights, but it was always safe. It was always okay. It was never...
research shows it's an underappreciated developmental experience for kids to roughhouse.
Yeah.
It's often associated with dads and uncles, but it really can be anybody.
Right.
And it's really important. I mean, when you see other animals in the animal kingdom, that's all those young youngsters in the species want to do. Yeah. And it's where they, children learn all sorts of things.
Yeah.
You could speak individually about their bodies and their strength and their balance and their impulses, emotional regulation, or whatever. Because there's always that point where things go a little too far, and you have to rein it in. But also the tremendous social learning and also the bonding that happens. Yeah, it's really important, and that's touched the whole way. Yeah,
I got to think that if I'd had my initial bad experience and then my family was weird or whatever, not about abusing me, but like maybe they don't like touch, or and then I don't get those other good examples,
or you were isolated,
or I was isolated, that would be even worse. So I'm thinking you take maybe in this case the listener takes their children to out with other parents that have also young children, and just is comfortable being there, almost mirroring behavior. It's like, hey, this is what we do with
and to be specific about roughhousing, because I don't often get a chance to talk about it. I did an episode years and years ago about the research of childhood development, and it might even be Googleable on our website or even on the YouTube channel if you just Google child development. I'm not sure, but a portion of that I talk about this research, and from my memory, they have found correlations and associations between the reported amount of roughhousing that the child has at home, and also certain markers and indicators of social health and academic health and self-esteem health in children. Yeah. So it's not just like something that we are theorizing as being a helpful factor in development. It's measurable, and it's just as important as the other typical things that you think of, like non-abuse or attunement to one's feelings. All that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, if you just look at the way that humans tend to act in their natural state, there's a variety of ways in which children and adults or older siblings will just have impulses to interact. Whether it's laughing together or roughhousing together or playing together, or the parents paying attention to the kids or feeding kids, all the things, tucking them in at night, telling them stories, all the things. And it's interesting as a culture, maybe even within psychology or parenting discourse, that certain very observable tendencies that we have, both as children and as adults, are not paid attention to and discounted as just like frivolous, But it stands to reason that the things that we tend to do, we are acting out our needs, you know?
Well, it's even worse because in many contexts, it's like, stop messing around, stop roughhousing, settle down, be quiet, right? Is kind of the tendency in a lot of.
Yeah, and with the ever increasing domestication of humans, right? And the way in which people will decorate their homes and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like I've noticed at your house that once your kids started to get to a certain age, no offense, but your house was a total mess.
Yes.
And because, you know, kids are running around and jumping on couches and playing with shit and not putting it away. And that's the way it should be. If you are trying to obtain the upper class ideal of a pristine marble home, you could become damaging to your children.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.